Ambassador, Zimbabwe is one of South Africa's main trading partners in the SADC region. What are the current trading figures between the two countries?
Well, I will give you the figures from 2023. Those are the latest that we have. So in 2023, Zimbabwe exported goods worth $2.23 billion to South Africa. And the main products were nickel matte, ores, raw tobacco, and coke. Coke is used in the steel industry. But for South Africa in 2023 exported goods to Zimbabwe worth $3.3 billion. And you can see, in fact, the trade is in favor of South Africa. And South Africa's main products to Zimbabwe were delivery trucks, electricity, refined petroleum, and of course we imported some grain to meet some of our food requirements there. So, but our relationship, trade relationship, as you can see, is healthy. But clearly for us in Zimbabwe, we need to do a lot more, and for South Africa to import a lot more from Zimbabwe, so that that trade relationship can become a bit more balanced. Because we have certainly seen, in fact, over the years, that the growth of the trade from Zimbabwe into South Africa has not been at the same level as the growth of the trade or the growth of the exports of South Africa into Zimbabwe. But that's a challenge to us as Zimbabwe as well, to try and do a lot more and perhaps also explore a lot more the opportunities that are here in South Africa.
Despite some challenges, Zimbabwe continues to boast several sectors that are still competitive and could be competitive regionally and globally, like you said. What are some of the country's competitive value chains?
Well, I will tell you, one of the major ones is in mining. You know, we are richly endowed with a variety of mines. We are talking of perhaps more than 60 minerals that are actually commercially mined in Zimbabwe presently. This is a sector where we see huge possibilities of value addition. As you are aware, I think one of the major agendas within SADC, but also even here in South Africa, is industrialization, is beneficiation. How do we beneficiate and get more value out of our minerals? So that's a value chain that we see offering a lot of possibilities. Talking about mining, we have what we call the energy minerals. You're talking about lithium, for instance. It's a major find in Zimbabwe. In fact, Zimbabwe is among the top 10 countries in Africa producing lithium. You have a motor industry here. The world is moving towards electric vehicles. The lithium mine industry offers the possibility of battery manufacturing, energy conservation, and that sort of thing. So this is one area. Agriculture. Our economy is anchored on agriculture.
I've already highlighted that the first president of Zimbabwe, the late Mr. Robert Mugabe, was the first to come to South Africa. I'm talking now of high-level visits between the two countries, which forms part of our relations. Would you like to talk to some other visits that have happened between the two countries?
Well, you know, you have had numerous visits taking place between our two countries. I always want to talk about people-to-people visits. And we'll talk about that when we talk about tourism. But I think you coming to really government to government, I'll confine myself more to the high levels of these visits, because we have officials visiting, we have ministers visiting, but I will just confine myself to a few of the visits, high-level visits that have taken place. You have just made reference to late President Mugabe's state visit to this country almost immediately in 1995, probably a year after you had gained freedom in this country. But in 1994, already late President Mandela visited Zimbabwe, and in fact one of the highlights of that visit was a recognition of his statesmanship, a recognition of his sacrifice, and we honored him by naming one of our major roads in Harare after him, so we call it Nelson Mandela Avenue, which is in Harare. But we can also talk about President Mugabe's visit in April 2015, and it is during that visit that we actually signed the agreement establishing the Binational Commission. And then we have President Zuma, former President Zuma, visiting Zimbabwe in November 2016. And this was for the inaugural session of the Binational Commission, again pushing forward the agenda for cooperation, for support and solidarity. Later you have President Mnangagwa visiting South Africa in 2018, and he also paid a visit here. President Cyril Ramaphosa visited Zimbabwe in 2018, and also last year he visited Zimbabwe. On both occasions he went to attend the inauguration of President Mnangagwa in 2018 and also last year, and President Mnangagwa reciprocated and came back here last year, and it was for the inauguration of the president. We were happy to receive President Ramaphosa last year in August for the SADC summit. As you are aware, Zimbabwe is the current chairperson. Deputy President Mashatile was just recently in Zimbabwe for the SADC Extraordinary Summit. So we've had exchanges of visits, and I know President Mugabe was here when you had the UN conference against racism, where he made the famous statement to say, Mr. Tony Blair, you can keep your Britain and we'll keep our Zimbabwe. And you may want to know, this country was also, to a large extent, also a political home for the late President Mugabe. He went to university here at Fort Hare.
Yes.
So the visits have not just been symbolic, but they also have been quite substantive in terms of developing and improving the relations between our two countries.